You can want closeness very badly and still become uncomfortable the moment closeness starts to become real. Not when they learn your favorite movie, not even when you tell them something vulnerable at 2 in the morning. The harder moment often comes later. They're disappointed by something you did. They want to be considered in a decision you'd normally make alone. They need an answer before you feel ready to give one. They see a part of you you'd rather manage privately. And suddenly, this person is no longer just someone who makes your life warmer. They've acquired weight in it. What they feel matters. What they think matters. What they choose can affect your plans. What they withdraw can hurt you. We talk a lot about vulnerability as being seen, but intimacy asks for something more difficult than being seen. It asks us to become influenceable. Once someone truly matters to you, you can no longer control exactly how much they affect you. And for some people, that's where closeness begins to feel strangely like losing control. Not because they don't want love, sometimes because they want love very much. They just also want to remain completely sovereign over the parts of life that love eventually touches. You can want someone to understand you without wanting them to challenge you. You can want to be loved without ever becoming dependent. You can want commitment while keeping every exit psychologically open. From the outside, that doesn't necessarily look like fear. It may look like independence, like needing space, like knowing your boundaries, like refusing drama. And sometimes that's exactly what it is. Space can be healthy. Independence can be healthy. Some demands really are intrusive. Some relationships make distance wise. The difficulty is that the same behavior can serve two very different purposes. Space can help you come back to a relationship with more clarity, or it can make sure nobody ever has enough influence to unsettle you for very long. Independence can mean, I can stand on my own feet, or it can quietly become, I've built my life so carefully that I never have to negotiate with anyone. So the behavior alone doesn't always tell you what's happening. You have to ask what the protection is protecting. And this is where a distinction matters. Autonomy is not the same thing as impermeability. Autonomy means I remain a separate person while taking you seriously. I can hear your disappointment without assuming I have to obey it. I can consider your needs without erasing my own. I can let your perspective change my mind without believing that changing my mind means losing myself. I can say no. I can disagree. I can keep parts of myself private. I can leave if staying is wrong. But your reality is allowed to matter. Impermeability is different. Impermeability means I feel safe only if your reality never has enough weight to alter mine. Your feelings can be heard, but they can't cost me anything. Your needs can be acknowledged, but they can't change my plans. Your disappointment can exist, but I can't have to sit with the possibility that I contributed to it. You can matter to me, but only up to the point where your importance starts to limit my control. That can look like strength, especially if you've spent years learning not to depend on anyone. There's dignity in being able to stand alone. There's wisdom in not making another person responsible for your entire emotional world. But a survival skill can quietly become an identity. I can survive without anyone becomes, I should never need anyone. I can make my own decisions becomes, nobody should meaningfully influence my decisions. And then love faces an impossible requirement. Come close enough to comfort me, but not close enough to frighten me. Know me, but don't interpret me in ways I can't control. Need me, but never enough that I feel responsible for anything. Matter to me, but not enough that losing you could reorganize my life. This is why disclosure can be misleading. Someone can know almost everything about you and still have very little weight in your life. They can know your childhood, your fears, your wounds, your secrets, and still not be included in your future. They can understand your defenses without ever being allowed to inconvenience them. They can know how you feel, while their own feelings change almost nothing you do. Knowledge matters, but knowledge alone doesn't create deep intimacy. At some point, their reality has to enter yours. And once that happens, intimacy stops being something one person manages alone. Now there are two protections in the room. Imagine one person feels overwhelmed during conflict and needs distance to think. They get quieter. They want fewer messages. They don't want to decide how they feel while everything is still intense. That may be completely reasonable. But their partner experiences prolonged uncertainty as threatening. So the more distance appears, the more they ask questions. The more they seek reassurance. The more urgently they want to know where the relationship stands. Now, each person's protection begins producing evidence for the other's fear. The person pulling away thinks, "This is why closeness is dangerous. The moment someone matters, they start taking over my emotional space." The person moving closer thinks, "This is why distance is dangerous. The moment I depend on someone, they disappear." So one retreats, the other pursues. And eventually, both can leave the interaction convinced they understood relationships correctly from the beginning. Closeness takes away freedom. Distance means abandonment. But each person's protection has become part of the environment the other person is trying to survive. You can call one avoidant and the other anxious. Sometimes that language helps, but it can also make us miss the relationship that's actually happening between two people. One person may genuinely need more autonomy. The other may genuinely need more reliability. One person's history matters, so does the other person's behavior, so does compatibility. The better question isn't simply, who has the unhealthy style? It's, can these two people let each other's reality matter without turning influence into control? Because intimacy does create influence. That part can't be removed. Before someone matters, you can decide what you want and simply do it. After someone matters, you may still choose exactly the same thing, but now there's another reality to consider. And that consideration can feel like a loss of freedom. In one narrow sense, it is. Commitment creates constraints that strangers don't have. If your partner is in pain, it may affect your evening. If they've made a major sacrifice for your shared life, it may affect your decisions. If something you repeatedly do hurts them, you may eventually have to decide whether that behavior matters more to you than the relationship does. That isn't automatically domination. It's what happens when another person's life becomes meaningfully connected to yours. Of course, there's a dangerous version of this. Some relationships really do swallow individuality. Some partners treat difference as betrayal. Some demands are controlling. Some forms of dependence become coercive. In those situations, protecting autonomy isn't resistance to intimacy. It may be necessary. But there's an opposite mistake. Sometimes what we call losing ourselves isn't self-erasure. Sometimes it's the unfamiliar experience of no longer living as though only one person's reality gets a vote. That doesn't mean the other person gets a veto. Consideration isn't obedience. Your partner's feelings don't automatically decide what you should do. But healthy intimacy probably does require consideration that has real consequences sometimes. Otherwise, the other person's reality may be acknowledged without ever being allowed to matter. This is why the fantasy of a perfectly effortless relationship is so seductive. Maybe there's someone whose needs never clash with ours, whose expectations always feel natural, whose boundaries never inconvenience us, whose timing always aligns, whose insecurities never activate our own. Compatibility matters enormously. Some relationships really are far harder than they need to be. But compatibility can't remove the central risk of closeness. If someone truly matters, they'll eventually affect you in ways you didn't choose. They'll misunderstand you. They'll need something inconvenient. They'll disappoint you. They may see something in you you'd rather not see. They may change. You may change because of them. There's no intimacy deep enough to matter that can also guarantee complete control over what that intimacy does to you. So perhaps the harder question isn't whether you're comfortable with vulnerability. You may be excellent at talking about your emotions. You may know your patterns, your triggers, your childhood, and your boundaries. The harder question is, can another person's reality have weight in your life without that weight automatically feeling like an invasion? Can you be influenced without feeling erased? Can you allow someone to matter without requiring yourself to remain untouched by everything they do? And just as importantly, can the person beside you offer the same freedom? Can your needs matter without becoming commands? Can they tolerate your separateness? Can they be affected by you without making you responsible for regulating everything they feel? Because healthy intimacy isn't one person becoming permeable while the other remains protected. It's mutual influence without mutual disappearance. Two people who remain two people, but neither has to pretend the other is optional in order to feel safe. The fantasy gives us connection without consequence. Real closeness can't. Once another human being carries real weight in your life, there are things to lose. There are compromises to consider. There are disappointments you can't simply dismiss. There are parts of yourself you can no longer protect by remaining completely untouched. Control protected us for a reason. A life in which nobody has too much influence may indeed be safer. Nobody can leave with too much of you. Nobody can disturb the life you built entirely on your own terms. But that protection has a cost. If nobody is allowed enough influence to deeply hurt us, they may also never be allowed enough influence to deeply matter. Perhaps the edge of closeness isn't the moment we reveal everything. It's the moment another person's reality is allowed to carry real weight in our own, without either person disappearing.